Now that everybody got through the gauntlet at the front. One minor announcement, cell phones off the table if you would and on vibrate. If they get near the mics, they provide a squeaky feedback through the audio. Let's see, we're going to go right to public comments?
We can go right there,
Okay,
yeah.
public comments. Anyone with items to discuss? Public comments? No. Okay, do you want to do, you want to do that's attendance?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's start off verbally with our attendance. If you would announce yourself and the group you represent.
Scott Singer, Mayor of Boca Raton from the Palm Beach County League of Cities.
Sharon Schneiderman, Palm Beach County PTA.
Michelle Jacobs, I'm with the Economic Council of Palm Beach County.
If I could interrupt just a moment, Michelle Jacobs is joining us as a new member, as one of the representatives from the Economic Council.
Yes, thank you.
Welcome.
As of officially.
Oh, officially, as of September 5th, the board will ratify her to be on the board. So she's here. She can't vote today, but she's certainly welcome to participate. And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Jesse Sanor with the FAU.
Paul Dumars, representing the Finance Committee for the school district.
Sherry Brown, representing Budget Advisory Committee.
George Elmore, Economic Council.
Rick Miller, also on the Finance Committee, representative.
John Trentithis, the Alliance of Del Rey.
David Porter, I'm representing Construction Oversight and Review Committee.
Good morning. I'm Leanne Evans, the treasurer for the school district and your liaison. So if you ever have questions regarding this committee, I'm the person you reach out to.
Good morning. I'm Wanda Paul, Chief Operating Officer for the district.
Good morning. David Dolan, Deputy Chief of Facilities Management for the school district.
Good morning. I'm Stella Jordan, Town of South Palm Beach. I missed the IROC meeting because I was held up, so I'm staying to listen to you.
Okay.
Susan Atherley, Principal, Dreyfus School of the Arts, representing the principals.
Good morning. Karen Brill. I'm the school board member for District 3.
Good morning, Salvatore Manueli, representing Cobra.
Blair Littlejohn from the Office of General Counsel.
Do you want the public too?
Yes, we need to go around the room.
John, start us off, please.
Sure. I'm John Doherty from Facility Construction and representing Aiken.
Ken Lassiter, Alderman for Clark.
John Levinson with Rel Enterprises, representing Morgan Smith General Contractors and Siskovich Architects.
Dave Wilhelm, Director of IT Infrastructure.
Ron Moran, Treasury. Okay, I think we got everybody. Thank you. All right, any public comments on anything? Seeing none. I got an old agenda, I guess, we're moving down to the bottom.
Okay, you got a new one.
There we go. Discussion for the minutes. Anyone have issues with the last minutes from our last meeting? Seeing none, they're accepted. And I guess this is you, Leanne, sales tax summary.
Okay. And I did want to mention for the group, if you have your ID badge, that will let you get in one of the side entrances so you don't have to go through the line up front. So just in case, and if you don't have it, I know, Ms. Jacobs, we need to get a picture from you so we can get you an ID badge.
Thank you.
But if anybody doesn't have a badge, please check with Brenda before you leave and we'll make sure you get one. And that will let you get in any of the exterior doors so you don't have to go through the line up front. Okay? And I'm sorry about that. It's a time of year. There's still a lot of people coming in to get cleared for different school projects and different jobs. So, but we thank you for coming and certainly appreciate your willingness to oversee the sales tax for us. It's an important part of our whole program. So this presentation, we started doing this a couple of months ago, where I give you an overview rather than going through all the backup materials. Makes the meeting go a little faster. All the backup materials are still here, and we're happy to go through those, but if we don't need them, we'll just stick with this. So receipts through July, 191 million have come in versus the projection of 171 million, so it's 111, almost a 0.5% of the projections. I'll let you know that through August, we have received the August collections. They came in higher as well. We're now at 112.9% of projections. So we continue to run ahead of where we thought we would be. those numbers will be reflected in your next meeting as well. And I always caution the group that just because we're running ahead now doesn't mean we'll run ahead throughout the entire 10-year window. So I don't get too excited about it yet. It's just we're happy to see it coming in, at least as projected. And the expenditures and interest earnings expenditures through June 30th were $45.5 million. Interest earnings are about $1.6 million, and that will continue to grow. You'll see one of the changes I've made that we'll be approving is that I'm breaking those interest earnings out into a separate account, so they're tracked separately from the rest of the reserves.
Question. If in a perfect world we hit dollar mark in year 9 instead of 10, does it stop?
Yes, it does. The date, it's actually built into the document, into their interlocal agreement, and if we hit the dollar amount we projected by September 30th of year 8, I think it's year 9, we shut it down.
It's in a year,
Yeah.
and I think it's September 1st.
Right.
So.
I actually have a little spreadsheet where we're tracking that, so it gets updated every month, and that's something I can bring into the committee. We're a long way away from that, but I know Sherry Brown does the same thing for Palm Beach County, so both organizations, and I'm guessing all the cities are doing that as well. They're all tracking to see where we fall. So we have a long way before we get there, but we're already have everything in place to make sure we don't miss that date.
So every city and the county and you guys all have to then individually notify Department of Revenue?
No, actually, the county would be the one responsible
okay.
for.
Yep.
But I think we're all tracking it because every committee is asking the same question, and rightly so. It's a good discussion to have.
It's nice to see that it's coming in strong right now, because it was such a new thing to do projections for, but it's 10 years is a long time. So it's not like found money or,
Under the previous referendum, we ran into a recession time where we were only at like 35% of projections. So it had plummeted.
Yeah.
So hopefully we don't have a recession, but it would not make sense to expect that over a 10-year window, there's not going to be a downturn at some point. Right. So we're grateful the money's coming in early, and we're certainly going to put it to use, and we'll continue to monitor it. Regarding the borrowing, we're still looking at that. I expect that we will need to borrow at some point during the fiscal year. While we have plenty of cash, school districts, the law says we have to have the money in place before we can enter into a contract. So depending on the type of borrowing, and right now we're leaning towards either a line of credit or commercial paper backed by a letter of credit, we can go to the board and the committees and get permission to borrow and actually put the facility in place and then only draw down cash as we need. And that's what I'm leaning towards. So we set the borrowing up. We wouldn't necessarily actually do it. We'd have an underlying fee for having that line outstanding. We're also looking at options, and this is more on the top side for the Finance Committee. They'll be looking at this. The other option we have is to borrow and go ahead and bring the cash in, spend that money first, and then we could meet some arbitrage spend-down requirements and possibly make money on the interest, which is what we did with the last sales tax. So there's a lot of pieces to that. I'll bring it to this committee to let you know what we're doing. The Finance Committee will be the ones that really dig into the details on that. But sometime this year, please expect that we're going to come to you with some type of borrowing.
A question on that. Do we have the $191 million in the bank? Or is that projected coming to us?
That's the total we've received, and we've spent $45 million of it. So we have a lot of money in the bank, and it's being invested, and that's why we have interest earnings the way we do. But the problem is, in order to put money out there in the budget to issue contracts, I had to put the borrowing in as a line in the budget. So before the end of the year, I have to at least go to the board, get permission to borrow, and get the facility in place so that we can draw cash down as we need it. So it's really two issues. One is the cash itself, and one is the budget side. And you have to have the line of credit in place to have it for budget. So whether or not we actually draw down a line of credit is something that we'll be working on with the committee, with the Finance Committee.
So you can't put it in the budget unless you know you've got the funds.
Right.
Okay, I thought you mentioned signing a contract, because that would be different, I guess.
Right, we can put it in the budget,
right,
and the line item in the capital plan has a line item for borrowing for the sales tax. So I had to have that to do the budget. In order for us to issue contracts, it also has to be in the budget. And by the end of the year, those things the budget has to match the actuals. So I'll have to put something in place by the end of the year. I don't necessarily have to draw down on it, but we have to have the facility in place.
Okay.
So it's one of the quirks. The last sales tax, the exact same thing happened. we put a line of credit in place it was back with commercial paper back to the line of credit. We weren't planning to borrow at all, but then we realized if we went ahead and borrowed, we had that cash in the bank. I was spending the debt proceeds very quickly, and the rest of the money was sitting there and earning interest. So we were able to get some positive arbitrage. We actually made about $2 million
$2.5 million.
after borrowing. So I don't know. I keep telling people I can't promise we'll do that again, but I certainly want to keep that in mind and make sure that we're using all the money effectively. Okay, and this is just the reference summary as of June 30th. So this is showing the budgets, which everything still matches exactly what we'd said it was going to be. There's, through here, through the sales tax. And it shows what the current budget is, the changes since the last meeting, and then the cumulative change, which is 0. Because the changes we're making put things back to the way they were. We'll explain that a little bit more when we get into the plan modifications. And it shows the expenditures to date. A little bit further down, we have the projects funded with other sources. That's where you do see increases, where project budgets have been increased. So those are on the major construction projects. Some of those have already been approved, and some of them we'll be approving today. And then it shows the expenditures. Most of those construction projects are just getting started. So, and some of them are still scheduled for several years away. We do have 5 plan modifications that we'll be going over today. And I think I want to go ahead and turn this over to, I'm not sure if it's
Sure. It'll be,
Dave. Okay, yes. Dave Dolan's going to go through and talk about some of the work that was done this summer.
Okay, good morning. To give a quick overview, you can read on the screen we have 20 major facility renewal projects at 10 schools. Those are the 10 schools listed there. We also have a lot of minor projects that went on. We actually have 5 different vehicles by which we go and procure services. These are major projects. These are things like new schools, modifications, additions. We have what we refer to as maintenance managed projects. Some of the services that went on at some of these schools that, were not done by a general contractor, but we actually facilitated the work through term contractors in our maintenance department. We're able to manage those. We also have security projects that will operate under the same guise. We also have special smaller projects like roof replacements, also done with vendor services. These are all the second bullet there, the minor projects and other items. And one other method that we use is direct material purchases. That's we're buying furnishings, furniture, classroom furniture upgrades, as well as equipment needed for the schools. Yeah, I was going to say, on our next slide, got some show and
Go
tell.
ahead and show a couple of videos.
Please.
This is all work done over the summer?
Yes. Yes.
Watson B. Duncan Middle School is set to get over $12 million worth of repairs with the one set sales tax. Right now we have paving going in. We have tennis courts being redone. We will have our basketball court redone this summer, our track redone this summer, parking lot redone, and the bus loop redone, just to name a few. In the future, we will get a refinished gym floor. We will get security systems. We will get a new intercom system, air conditioning, flooring, ceilings, technology upgrades. We're very excited here at Watson B. Duncan Middle School. We need it. Believe it or not, Watson B. Duncan was chosen as one of the top 5 most deplorable schools in the county, which surprised me, so I think we're hiding it quite well. But we are really looking forward to the upgrades, and I think the students deserve it. I think the kids will notice a big difference aesthetically with their outside courts. The parents will appreciate not having the potholes in our parking lot, and the bus drivers will appreciate the new bus loops as well. I'm just looking forward to the renovation and the future of Watson B. Duncan Middle School.
Let's see. I want to make sure I'm picking the right one.
That's okay. That was a great one.
Okay.
Your Penny is hard at work at Timber Trace Elementary.
Your Penny
where this
is
aging
hard at work
campus
at
is
Timber
getting
Trace
a badly
Elementary,
needed facelift. Where this aging
Our
campus is
school's
getting a
over
badly
21
needed
years old,
So there are lots of parts and pieces to our building that just need some taking care of and need to be brought back up to speed. So this summer we'll be getting our parking lot redone. As you can see, our playground's being refurbished at this point, so the kids will be very excited to see that. I think the penny sales tax is extremely important to our schools. The general public tends to think that lots of funding comes our way, and there are multiple places that those funds need to go to, and facilities are oftentimes one of the last pieces. That facilities piece allows, as an administrator and as teachers, it allows us to stay focused on our kids here at school when those things are running well and running smoothly and maintained regularly. So for us, it's a real important part of our day.
And workers are helping pave the way to student success thanks to the penny sales tax. Claudia Shea reporting for the Education Network, keeping you informed.
Okay, one of the things I wanted to point out is from the school district website, there's a link for Your Penny at Work. And you can click on that and scroll down. There's updated videos. So we're always adding new videos for the work that's being done. You can also scroll down the link to the sales tax. Your committee site is right on this page as well. But there's a lot of videos being made for these projects. So you can just, we're going to try to pick a couple for each meeting to give you an idea of the most recent work. There's a tremendous amount of work that was done over the summer.
In fact, there was, I had 125 projects that were done, and because our cutoff is, July 30th?
June 30th.
Or June 30th? A lot of the expenditures this summer don't show up in the numbers because we worked all the way through opening a school and got a lot of this stuff done. Again, as a reminder for those of you who might not be familiar, a lot of the facilities renewal projects are 2-year projects. So when these principals were making reference to some of the work was done and some will be done, their schools will be done all the way through this school year and into the next summer. It will be done next summer. With that, we then have a next round of schools that are starting next summer, and they will also go 2 years. So it's an ever-moving process, and we are in the midst of hiring those consultants and contractors right now and anticipate being ready to roll at the start of the summer.
I have a question, and I hope it doesn't come off as a silly question, but based on the news that we've seen coming out of Detroit about with the water systems up there, have you guys tested water in these older schools? Are you making sure that the water that's coming out of the fountains is drinkable for our kids?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Our maintenance department and environmental conservation department do regular testing on everything from the water, the air, environment as a whole.
And during construction too, to make sure the air quality is fine?
Very much so.
Okay.
Yes.
I think we're very lucky that the citizens in Palm Beach County supported the sales tax because we talked to some of our counterparts throughout the state, but a lot outside the state of Florida too, and some of the challenges they're facing. And when we attend a conference, and I was not attending the national conference, but I've heard people come back and say they're talking to our counterparts and hearing their challenges they're facing, and we're saying, well, we don't have that problem. Our citizens have already approved something, and we're taking care of the backlog. So I think everybody here is very grateful for the support of the community and hope that continues into November to try to take care of our kids and make sure everything's in place that we need. So these are just some pictures of other work that was done.
Yes. The 10 schools, the primary work that was done this summer were restroom improvements, as well as classroom interior improvements. Now, didn't complete the entire school, and we've been fortunate that some of the principals have an extra classroom or two that might be vacant. They're allowing us to continue to work during the school year. Even without that, we are working nights and weekends over the course of the school year so that we can pick up some time and make sure that next summer's completion is right on target.
I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we have this time versus the last sales tax. The last sales tax, we were building new schools and replacing schools. This work is very different. It's very intrusive and it interrupts the school day. So you have to make sure you're working with the principals and we're not impacting the schools. So sometimes projects take longer than we would like. We'd love to have the school empty to go in and get work done right away. And education is the most important thing going on in that building. So we adjust.
To caveat what Leanne was saying, the bulk of the work is deferred maintenance. And so that's behind the walls, up in the ceilings, those kind of things. So it is very intrusive, but one of our goals, and when I got here, I pledged that we would not interrupt the educational effort. And so with that, it requires a lot of planning, and again, nights, weekends, and holidays. And so we will continue along in that vein as we go forward.
I can add one thing about the water issue that was mentioned. Lead is no longer allowed in solder, and solder is what puts the copper pipes together, and that's been probably since back in the 80s. So most of our schools would have not been put together plumbing-wise using lead in solder, and that's where most of the problem where the lead would leach out in older pipes.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so that concludes that. What I'd like to do is go ahead and move on to the proposed plan modifications, because these are the changes. Now, in your package, you have the legal pages, that is the detailed legal and letter pages, the detailed reports. What I've done is, as always, we've got the actual changes, and these numbers, proposed plan modification, this is number 13, is referenced on those detailed pages. But these are the actual changes that took place, and we've addressed every change since the last meeting. So this is a summary, and I'm going to go through the first few, and then Dave will be going through the last ones, depending on the type of work that was done. So this first one is classroom technology and the lease payments. And back at the very beginning of the sales tax, back with the very first and number 8, we had asked to change the way we were funding the classroom technology. The district had originally planned to do classroom technology, and it was going to be the short throw projectors. And we've changed, the technology group has looked, and they really wanted to move towards the interactive flat panels that would work better for teachers. It's more interactive, it lets them do things a lot easier, and lets the students use it as well. That's not deemed infrastructure based on state law. So we were in a position where we couldn't get started on that work unless we had a legislative change. So we were putting a vehicle in place to borrow so we could go ahead and use other funds and then pay it back with sales tax once it was approved. Legislature actually approved that this year. So we hadn't borrowed yet. So I'm really unwinding what we had put in place to do that. So I'm reversing the PPM number 1 and number 8 and putting it back to the way it was originally. So this is just undoing what we had planned to do for the funding. The technology team is working diligently, and those flat panels are being brought into schools as we speak. A lot of them are coming in during this fiscal year, and there's even more coming in FY20. So at a future meeting, we're probably going to have a video that shows how that all works. I believe they went into Lake Worth High School first. That was the first big install, and it just happened a couple weeks ago. So maybe at the next meeting or one in the future, we'll bring something in to show what those look like. And that's a lot of this $100 million, is putting those flat panels into the schools. We've also spent some of the money that's already been spent for classroom technology is audio enhancement. So the teachers have a microphone that they wear around their neck, and it's piped into all the speakers in the room, so every child hears as if they're sitting in the front of the room. So we've been doing a lot of that, and these flat panels are coming in. So this item is just rewinding what we did and put it back to the way we originally planned to do it. So I'm really happy to bring this one to you. This is the way we'd like to do it.
Are all of our schools Wi-Fi and internet connected?
Yes.
Hardwired? Every school?
Every school has Wi-Fi. We did that a couple of years ago. Some of the other items around the referendum list for technology, not classroom technology, but for the infrastructure technology, is replacing a lot of the wireless routers. We put them in several years ago, and technology's changed. I don't know if all of you have changed your Wi-Fi router at home. I'm getting ready to do that because it changes so much from over 3 or 4 years. It's a different world. So that is another referendum project that's underway. Any questions on this one?
All right, somebody make a motion to approve this one?
So moved.
So moved. Second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Okay, and number 14 is another thing where I'm unwinding something. PPM number 2 was increasing the sales tax reserve because we'd received extra sales tax revenues and we had interest earnings. And after a year of meetings, I've realized that wasn't necessarily the best way to do it. What we should be doing is the sales tax reserves really should stay constant. They shouldn't change. What we instead did, I went and changed the amount of sales tax we're projected to get in year 10 of the sales tax to bring the total revenues to be the original number. And then I'm also taking the interest earnings and put them in a separate line so they can't get mixed up with the other dollars. So really, again, unwinding and trying to make this cleaner. So the sales tax reserve number you see for proposed budget, that is the original budget that was in the referendum list. And then the increase here is the sales tax reserve, and I've just reduced the reserves to make it match that number. Are there any questions on that one?
We'll make this simpler. Anybody have objections? Okay, approved.
Okay. Okay, now we're getting into some changes that are being made on construction projects. Dave, do you want me to just go ahead and go through these and you can answer questions?
I was going to say that's probably...
Okay. So we have a group of projects, Addison, Meisner, Verdi, Washington, and Winbrook. We've increased the size of those schools. So Addison Meisner is going from 1,200 to 1,308. This also includes additional funds needed for a temporary campus to house these students, and I want to take a minute to talk about that. There's not enough room at the Addison Meisner facility to put the kids in a temporary campus or leave them in their school and build the new school on the playfields. That's what we've done in the past. There's just no room. It's in the middle of a residential area. There's not extra space. So we're going to put the portables at our Don Estridge site, which is a little further west. But at Don Estridge, there is room there, and we're working with the city of Boca Raton, and we'll talk about that in just another minute when we talk about O5C. The city has agreed to give us land to build that school. So there's some land at Don Estridge plus the land that we're working on with the city of Boca Raton. So we're going to build a temporary campus. We're leasing portables. They'll come on the campus. We'll use them for the Addison Meisner and the Verdi projects, actually Verdi first and then Addison Meisner. That way we can get those schools built faster. It will mean we're transporting kids for the year, but it's a lot safer for them. It's a lot faster. It saves money. It's just a better way to get it done. So the Verdi project was increased not only in size, but both budgets were increased to deal with the cost of the portable school and because we're increasing the size of those schools. So that takes care of number 1 and 2. Washington Elementary was expanded from 350 to 503 students, and Winbrook was expanded from 872 to 970. So this is just based on the cost per student station calculation, and we've also adjusted them for the extraordinary costs within those budgets. And this money, while they're on the referendum list, all of these are being financed with COPS that is repaid with other dollars. So we're not really spending sales tax dollars on this, but it's on the referendum list. I just wanted to make sure I went over all those with you. So this is a big change for all these projects.
Ready for questions?
Go right ahead.
Okay. What are the size increases due to? Is that DOE shrinking our classroom size, or is that demographics?
It is demographics. My apologies. It is demographics. At least with Addison, Meisner, and Verdi, it's well publicized that Boca is considerably short on some of their student capacity, and we're doing everything we can. As a matter of fact, one of the points on Verdi is it's being increased from a K-5 to a K-8, which helps our middle school enrollment dramatically. Yes, Washington, based on the demographics in the area, needed an upgrade. And Winbrook is actually just being upsized to what is our standard size, K-5. based on needs.
So it's all demographics. It has nothing to do with classroom size shrinkage?
No.
No.
No,
Okay.
this is actually more kids.
Okay. Were any of these on the DOE do not build list?
No.
No. So these were all approved
These
by
are all
DOE?
approved.
yeah.
These
Okay.
all have been approved by DOE.
Okay. Any other questions? Any objections? Approved? Yes? Oh, well.
That's a thumbs up.
I didn't think, the mayor would be objecting to these.
Clear thumbs up, thank you.
All right.
Okay, so then modification number 16, it is also some increases in projects that are, again, all funded with borrowing. These are not sales tax funded, but they're on the referendum list. So every year, we do an update to the capital plan, and we're going to talk about the capital plan in just a couple minutes. And we always go through and double check to make sure the numbers are right. And these budgets are based on the current cost per student station and the extraordinary costs that we build in. And extraordinary costs are things like demucking, hurricane hardening, water retention, things that we have to do here in Palm Beach County that aren't necessarily required in other parts of the state. And the Department of Education actually strictly records and tells us what can be considered extraordinary cost. So we know those things are going to happen. These final budgets, and with every project when we do these increases, the budgets will be changed again when we actually award contracts, and then again when the projects are done. So you will see changes on these projects again as we move forward. So please don't think this is the only time we'll talk about these schools. But these are all projections. We haven't awarded contracts on any of these yet. So they could come in under budget as well. They can't go over the cost per student station that's set by DOE. So we have to live with that.
I would add construction inflation to a list of your reasons. And is that something that DOE allows a cost increase for or not?
Again?
Well, cost inflation.
I think it would be a conversation with them. Mm-hmm. But it seems like that's reasonable, that if the market has increased, then of course we would have to reach out to them. But typically, in my experience, yeah, they definitely account for inflation.
Well, they don't in their cost per student station because that's a statewide standard that doesn't suit our cost of living in this area for what it costs to build things.
And that is one of the biggest challenges.
That would be a conversation, and then, kind of, again, our linchpin is kind of the extraordinary cost. So as much as we can move towards the extraordinary costs, and as much as we can make adjustments to not impact the cost per student station, similar to trying to have a temporary campus, that helps us. So sometimes we do have to be creative in that respect.
So the CM will give us a bill for $30 million to demuck and $4 million to build the school. Yeah, that'll work.
Yeah, well, okay.
And one of the points that was made about that remote campus, it allows us to construct the project that much faster. And in doing so, saves us quite a bit of money. So it does translate to a benefit to the taxpayers.
Okay, any issues on this? Questions? Any objections? All right, accept it.
Okay. The last item, this is number 17, and this is addressing changes in time. And some of these changes were done because DOE has actually told us we can't build a couple of schools. That is the southwest area 05C, which in our capital plan we refer to as Boca Raton Area Elementary School. So at some point I need to fix the ISSOC report so it matches the capital plan, but it is 05C. And then the Lake Worth area O, we call it O High School. DOE has told us we can't build those schools. We're working with DOE to try to get exceptions and to get them to agree with it, but at this point they did not allow it to be approved through the Ed Plant survey. And we won't be able to build the school until we have DOE approval. It's not allowed. So we've pushed back O by 1 year. 05C actually shows it coming in. We were going to bring it to you and show it was funded in 19 or 20, but DOE won't allow that. And we've now adjusted it so it's set to start to be funded in 22, right after we finish up the school at Verdi and Addison Meisner, because they're on the land that we plan to build the school on. So I think it's just timing those schools. That's still subject to change as we still work through these and finish up Addison, Meisner, and Verdi. We figure out where where the temporary school is going to be placed. If we can be building simultaneously, we may come back to you and try to build O5C sooner. But this is the way it's showing in our capital plan right now that's going to be adopted next week. So for the others, I'm going to walk through these, and Dave is able to answer any questions that you have. But these two transportation central complexes, we've moved them back 1 year. We're still working on the design, so we had the design money this year, and construction would be in 20. There's just no need to have the construction money yet. We're not quite ready to build yet. Grove Park and Pine Grove were moved back 3 years to allow us to continue working on the development of programs to be at the facilities. And then I talked about OOO and O5C, and then the last one, 15A, is moved up a year based on when we think the school will be needed.
So I have a question for you. The middle school behind Sunset Palms, was that never a part of this, or was it removed?
It's not on the referendum project list, so it's in our capital plan.
Okay, so it still remains in the plan, and there's no update on the visit that just occurred with DOE coming here?
Well, I'll have Dave talk about some of those conversations with DOE. Really, it was a data exercise. It was just based on numbers and what they see as our capacity. And so I'll let you.
Yes, you hit it right on the head. It was very data-driven, and they primarily focused on their sets of rules by which we have to go through an electronic process to apply for these schools. And their rules don't jive with, from our perspective, they don't necessarily jive with what they really want to have happen. They don't want us to move kids around in different locations to get things to balance. They want to see what the true number is, but their system doesn't allow it. So we're working with them to try to see if there's a way they can improve upon that. To that end, we are hoping that we to reapply for at least 2 of the 3 in the very near future. The middle school, their comment was that our demographics didn't necessarily seem to support it at this time. So they basically said it may be a concern for future that we can
So as a follow-up, my understanding is they were only looking at existing students in our schools. They're not looking at the census or actually the true count. For example, in my community, with all of the babies and elementary school students that are moving up. So I don't know if we're able to somehow get them to understand that. The other question is, and I don't know if it fits in here, but my understanding is that we were going to be hit with penalties for the portables put on Krista McAuliffe's site. Did that happen, or are we fine?
That's one of the reasons we chose to do temporary portables at Krista McAuliffe, because they don't count as permanent capacity. If we would have put the concretables on there, and that would have been an issue. And so that kind of goes to our philosophy, or my philosophy, in terms of using temporary buildings, similar to having it over at the Don Estrick site. You know, so that kind of gives us some flexibility, and we can hold that site for 5 years. Hopefully within that 5 years, we'll have O5C that we can build. And so that's part of the strategy as we go forward.
For the rest of the group, what we're talking about is a conversation with the Department of Education. We're trying very hard to get them to approve us building these schools. And they're really digging into data. They're not looking at students that were coming in or at other developments that are happening in an area, which is what we are required to do. So there's a mismatch. And we're trying very hard to work with DOE to get them to give us permission to build schools when we need to build schools.
We were, you know, the conversation, we had 2 very intense, robust conversations with DOE around the 3 schools. And again, you know, we looked at bus routes and drive time and all of that. I shut down basically most of my division to support this effort, to be very aggressive in trying to go after these 3 schools that we think and we know we need. And so that conversation, we still are providing them with information. Hopefully we'll get an answer fairly soon.
Okay, questions on this one? Comments? I have a comment that I'm bothered by the 3 years of Grove Park. I know Grove Park, it's across the street from my office, and it has needed work for the last 15 years. And without knowing more about what these plans are to kick it for 3 years, I can't support not putting the funds in there to get the renovations done sooner rather than later. So I'll be voting against this one.
And if I may, I think I want to cause a pause on that, or take a
Okay.
pause on that. There's still further discussion on what happens with Grove Park, and hopefully we'll be able to present something to you fairly soon on that.
These are the dates that are in our capital plan, and we're going to talk about the capital plan next. But the first thing I tell you is the capital plan changes every year.
Right.
The first year is the FY19 budget. Everything else gets revisited and annually, and we actually have already started the process for the FY20 capital plan before the new one's even adopted. So we already know that there's additional changes that we need to make, and these very well could be changed back. But this is reflecting what is in the capital plan that'll be going to the board to approve next week. And we want to make sure ISSOC sees these things before the board does. We like to tell the board that the committees have already seen the plans beforehand. So this is the current version. And as I've told the board, the one thing I promise you is it's going to change. It's a plan. The only year that really matters for the capital plan is the first year that is the current year budget. Everything else, I worry more about the first than the second year too, because that's what we're building up to use. But beyond that, every bit of it can and probably will change.
So Wanda, will a decision on what's happening with Grove Park be made before the next capital plan gets etched in place?
I would think so. That's the intent.
Then I can support this with that, because then I can object at that time if it's still getting kicked down the road.
Okay.
It was originally funded in 2020, so it may be moved back to 2020 or put to 21. We'll work through that over the course of the
I
next
just wanted
year.
to see on the radar instead of off the radar, that's
Right.
all. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, any objections? All right, this is accepted then.
Okay. And then I added this, the next item is the capital plan. So we attached the full capital plan, and I added in a short presentation. I created this actually late last night, because when I was looking at it and thinking I'm going to bring in the capital plan and walk you through it, it's very much for this committee like going through those project budget reports. I want you to have the backup, but I don't think you want me walking through line by line. So I pulled out a presentation. This is actually started with what we gave to the board and the Construction Oversight Review Committee. It's just been updated. So this is a way to look at the capital plan overall in a few slides rather than digging into numbers. So the capital plan is required to be adopted by the board prior to budget adoption. That's in state law. So September 5th, the budget's adopted at 5:05. The capital plan will be adopted in a special meeting just prior to that. This is updated annually to address changes in enrollment, the needs of the district, and we've talked about with school construction projects. They do get moved up and moved back based on the current projections. And I guarantee you it's going to change. It does include everything for the 10 years, so it does include the entire life of the sales tax. State law requires that we do a 5-year plan. We do a 10. We started doing that for this sales tax. We wanted to show the entire amount, entire life of it, and we've just continued it to do 10 years, even though we really at this point probably need a 9-year plan to show everything. I like seeing the 10 years. It gives us a chance to spot issues well in advance. I think we're the only district in the state that does a 10-year plan at this point. So just briefly to go through, I'm showing these are all the construction projects. The ones that are in italics are on the referendum project list. So those are the ones that show up on the reports that you see. So we have the additions, replacement or modernizations, and new schools, and it's a total of $686 million over the next 10 years that will be spent on these projects.
And again, that is sales tax and district dollars?
Yes. It's a combination. It's not all sales tax.
Right.
But you'll see a lot of them are in italics. A lot of these projects, and most of the projects, even when they're in italics, they're not actually funded with sales tax. They're just on the referendum list. Most of the construction projects are being financed and we paid back out of property taxes. Debt service, we include this because it is the biggest part of is one of the biggest pieces of the budget. It's $1.6 billion. We have $1.4 billion from previously issued debt. We plan to issue $250 million worth of long-term debt. Our debt service payments associated with new debt is $250 million. And then we will be doing an equipment lease this year to expedite some air conditioning replacements, not funded with sales tax, but other ones That's one of our big challenges, is keeping this schools cool right now. So that's a big portion of the budget. And this is we give this to the Finance Committee and the board. We have a policy that states that our debt service cannot exceed more than 50% of the millage outlay. So that's that red line. So we're bumping right up against that for the next few years, and then there's lots of capacity after that. But this is one of the things we have to check off with the 5-year plan. Other facility projects, the facility renewal projects, this is all the deferred maintenance. So there's almost $950 million in the capital plan for work still to be done. $170 million for other types of projects, $700 million for facility maintenance, and then there's money for purchasing or leasing sites, $38 million. Classroom technology and infrastructure, we've broken it down into classroom technology projects. $95 million, a large portion of that is sales tax. So you're seeing that in your reports. And there is some of the money for the technology and infrastructure sales tax. Most of that, honestly, is other funds. But there is a portion of it that's sales tax. And then the technology maintenance.
Question for on real estate. To my understanding, since we don't have concurrency anymore, we can't force new developers to donate land for future schools. So we have to buy any land we need for future schools, even in the middle of a large development.
We actually still get land donated by developers.
But we can't force them.
We can't force them. We work with the cities, though, to have the city ask them to help donate land. We've done that in a couple of times. So our Planning and Intergovernmental Relations Department worked very hard with the developers and the municipalities to try to arrange for land whenever we can. But we do have money in the budget for some land purchases.
Okay, because there was a report in the paper of a developer going to build its own charter school on its new site instead of being required to donate land for public schools.
That can happen too. We're doing our best to mitigate it, but we can't control what developers do.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, security projects. There's $62 million of the main budgets. $39 million of it is actually there for capital purposes. So it's single point of entry, cameras, adding things in, and $23 million is maintaining systems that we have in place. A lot of this money is sales tax driven, and we've moved this up. We're moving all the sales tax money for security into this current year and next year so we can expedite those projects. So that is part of the borrowing. We want to move these things up to get them done as quickly as we can. At this point, it's 2 years is probably as fast as we think we can get it done.
And that's pretty aggressive.
It's very aggressive.
So,
but we're doing our best. We want to get that done.
And that is all hardware changes, not personnel.
It is not personnel.
That's, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, correct.
Capital.
That's assets.
None of this is personnel.
Right.
Hence the importance of passing the next tax
Right.
referendum in November.
Right. This is just for buildings and equipment. Transportation, there's money for school buses and support vehicles, and that's funded with sales tax, a large portion of it. And then the other items are funded from other sources. And then we also have furniture and equipment that we buy and replace and maintain, so that none of that is sales tax, but it's just part of the capital plan.
Haven't you bought all the new buses already?
Not all of them. We have
No.
40 coming up for this board
Right.
meeting for approval in September.
Right. We've got them
So-
spread out with roughly, it's $9.7 million a year. This year is less. For 19, it's 4.8 because we gave them a year and a half's worth last year. So it's spread out over the 10-year window. And other items, we have money for property and flood insurance. And again, all these numbers are over 10-year windows, so the number seems very large. Property and flood insurance is actually $8.7 million a year. The reserves, this includes the sales tax, the $50 million of sales tax reserves. Most of this is in the last 10 years, so this is something I caution the board on. That looks like a very large number, and it is. Most of it's in the last 5 years of the capital plan, and it's probably going to be used for something else as needs arise. So
Or as inflation
Or
happens.
inflation. We purposely have reserves built in those last 5 years because when you look at a 10-year plan, it's very hard to project exactly what you're going to need and exactly what the costs are going to be. So those reserves, I think a lot of them will be used, but we'll continue to report on that. And then charter schools, we have 114 million over the 10-year window. And this is something we talked about last year. There was a law change, and the state said that we're required to fund charter schools last year. So we had to give part of our capital money last year to charter schools. This year, the state fully funded the capital outlay for charter schools. So there's 10.4 million that we're expecting to receive from the state that we will pass on to charter schools, but none of that's district money. It's coming from the state specifically for it. There's no guarantee that the state would fully fund it in future years. So our capital plan assumes that the district has to pay that every year. And each year, as we go through the legislative session, if we find out the state is funding it, then we have a bucket of money that we can allocate for other needs. So we're being very conservative by saying we're setting the money aside for this. Hopefully the state continues to fund it. We've got a list of needs that we'd like to fund with this money. A lot of money for technology, for air conditioners. There's a lot of needs that we have. But for right now, we've got it earmarked for charter schools. So that kind of summarizes the capital plan. Our big challenges, the uncertainty regarding charter schools is number one on the list. Not fall behind is the rising construction costs and how we're going to deal with that. It's going to be a challenge as we move forward. All the projects have to be approved by DOE, and we have 3 projects in our capital plan that DOE has not approved. So they are not in FY19. They're in 20, 21, 22. We're hoping to get DOE approval, and that we talked about that earlier. Everything is subject to the cost per student station and student capacity. I mean, DOE gets to tell us what we can build and what we can't. So it's something that we have to work on. And overall, the capital revenue looks really nice. We've got the sales tax money coming in to help cover those things. I always want to point out that while the budget looks much better than it did a few years ago, most of it is sales tax, and it's earmarked for very specific projects. It can't be used for anything else. So we flag those in the capital plan. We actually put in parentheses an ST if it's sales tax funded, and REF for referendum if it's funded with the referendum, but not the sales tax dollars. So we make it very, very clear that those dollars are earmarked and can't be used for anything else. Closing comments, I've said this already. The capital plan is updated every year, and there absolutely will be changes. We'll be adjusting them, and we're already starting work on the FY 2020 capital plan, and we'll bring that back to you this time next year. Any questions on the capital plan?
Okay.
Not. I'd like to, before we do anything else, point out that the future meeting dates are on the second page of your agenda. We've listed them out there, and we've actually gone through all of 2019. I haven't sent all the 2019 meeting invites out. I only went through 2018. If you all are ready, I can go ahead and send those out to you, that we do have it scheduled. I don't like to clutter people's calendars up for a year in advance or for 2 years in advance, but I think we're about to the point, so I'll probably be sending those out soon. And the next one is going to be, and I just noticed this says Friday, November 1st. It's Thursday, November 1st. There was a conflict. We originally planned to do it on the 9th. And there is a statewide finance conference, and all of staff are all going to be traveling to that on the West Coast.
That was 2018 you were just pointing to. First one at the top is today's date.
Right.
Oh, this November, right.
Yeah, November,
Okay, so that
for
one
November
changes.
18th, it should be Thursday, November 1st. I apologize for that. I'll get that fixed. And it's on it's
Okay,
correct in
I
your
see that.
calendars.
Yep.
It is correct in your calendars. And then the change we made to the agenda from what I sent to you previously to now is that we moved the election of officers from the beginning of the meeting to the back. And I thank Mr. Porter for that suggestion. It is much smoother to have the current chair run today's meeting and then do the election, and the new chair, if there is a new chair, could take over for the next meeting. So I guess that's the next item. So at this point, I think I take over the meeting.
Okay.
And I'd ask the committee if you have any nominations for a chair for the upcoming year. The current chair is Mr. Porter. Our current vice chair is Mr. Elmore, just in case you weren't aware. So if there are any suggestions of who you'd like to serve as chair?
I'm going to nominate both again to repeat.
Second.
Okay. Makes this fast. Any other nominations? Okay, can I get all agree?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so
I
we'll
campaigned
continue.
hard.
Keep up the
So-
good work.
That concludes the meeting. If you have any questions, please let us know, and thank you again for coming. We greatly appreciate your work towards overseeing the sales tax.
Sure. The staff meeting all day.
Thank you.